Welcome, I'm Ben Sek. This is Jake Van Lunen. This is Grand Prix Toronto, round 14. This is the second last round before we cut to our final 8. It's Maxime Auger versus Syed. Maxime is playing a Serum Visions with an island, but let's see
He's playing Jeskai Through the Breach.
Jeskai Through the Breach. This is a deck that got a little bit of play at the last Pro Tour as well as the Grand Prix, the tournament before. Syed looks like he's playing humans. He opens up with a Aether Vial, one of the, if not the best openings that the humans deck can have, and follows it up with another one of the best cards that the humans deck has, the Kitecell Freebooter. So, in the hand of Maxime, he has 4 land, Electrolyze, Snapcaster Mage. Can only take 1 card, so almost definitely taking that Electrolyze.
Yeah, the Electrolyze is the only card that interacts with the Freebooter itself. The thought process, if you did want to take the Snapcaster, would be that your opponent would have to tap out in the following turn, and maybe if your hand was particularly set up well to win over the course of the next 2 turns, if that's the way your opponent played, you could do that. But I think Electrolyze is going to get picked over 80% of the time there.
Okay, let's see what Maxime is going to do. He's just going to play a Steam Vents tapped. Doesn't want to take too much damage against the aggressive 5-color humans deck. He brings the Aether Vial up to 2 counters, which is kind of the magic number in the deck, right? There's pretty much the most density of creatures at that casting cost.
Yeah, I think a lot of the time you'll see the deck go up to 3 if they're not hitting a 3rd land drop, just so they can drop some Mantis Riders on the board. But 2 is definitely where the biggest glut of creatures is for the deck. And
it does look like he actually has, I think, every card in his hand, barring a land, is at 2. He has a Meddling Mage, a Thalia's Lieutenant, let's see, what else have we got here? Dark Confidant. But it's funny, he's leading with the Thalia, but in response to the trigger of putting counters on humans, he's actually going to play a Meddling Mage. He does know about 1 card in Maxime's hand, which is the Snapcaster Mage, so it'll be interesting to see if he decides that he'll go for the guaranteed choice. I think it will be the case. He also attacks for 2 with the Kitecell Freebooter, having gotten a +1/+1 counter. So one little tricky timing thing, I guess it's not really that tricky timing-wise, but...
with the Thalia's Lieutenant trigger on the stack, Zan used the Aether Vial to flash in a Meddling Mage, and that put a +1/+1 counter both on the Thalia's Lieutenant, and as the Thalia's Lieutenant's trigger resolved, it put a +1/+1 counter onto the Meddling Mage.
Right.
Cool interaction there.
Zan decided to keep it at 2, kind of indicating that he does have a lot of his 2-drops in his hand. Now playing a Noble Hierarch, putting a counter on the Thalia's Lieutenant, and another Thalia's Lieutenant.
And we may end up seeing this Vial trick again here.
But it looks like there's going to be a Cryptic Command on Zan's side. I wonder if he thinks he might have gotten a little too tricky with his Thalia's Lieutenant, because if he chose to do it via the Aether Vial, he would have avoided the counter magic.
That's absolutely true.
He was going for the +1, trying to get an extra counter, but actually might have cost himself 4 counters.
And I mean, that could make a difference, because he was attacking for 8 there, as opposed to attacking for 12 if he had put it in via Vial, and that would have had attacking for 12 would have had Maxime dead, even if Maxime had a single removal spell.
So Maxime actually is using his Desolate Lighthouse to basically loot I think he realizes he may need to actually get like some sort of interaction like a lightning bolt. He's going to he actually vials in a Dark Confidant and he packs it up. So the choice of playing that Thalia's lieutenant out of his hand did not cost him, or at least we're not it's not 100% incorrect line, but it probably is the higher variance play.
Yeah, I think also when your opponent has 4 mana untapped, you have to expect that they have something, and perhaps he was thinking that he was going to, be met with some type of board sweeping effect in the following turn. He was just looking to get in damage. He thought that the best way to rebuild if he was hit by a board sweeping effect would be to untap with a Confidant in play.
Yeah, that's possible. That's absolutely true. Okay, so the players are sideboarding. 5-color humans, Jeskai control. This seems like a really good match for the 5-color human deck pre-board. How does that change after the sideboard?
So looking at the sideboard, Maxime, for games 2 and 3, will have access to Anger of the Gods, a copy of a Braid, an Entrancing Melody, and a Pia and Kiran Nalar. I imagine he might also bring in one of his pair of Vendilion Click.
Entrancing Melody is a card I've kind of seen pop up recently. I mean, it seems like it's a Ixalan limited powerhouse, but how does it really fit into the modern metagame? It seems a little bit expensive. Maybe how does it really fit in?
So it ends up stealing inexpensive creatures. So you kind of get a 2-for-1. You end up blocking and trading with the guy that you took from your opponent. Sometimes you'll take something like a Kitesail Freebooter that had not attacked on the previous turn, and then it greatly disincentivizes your opponent from attacking into it. It's a control magic effect, which is traditionally quite powerful. The fact that it's not a permanent itself, it's not an enchant creature, something like a Threads of Disloyalty, means that it's harder to interact with for a lot of decks. Against like the green-black decks when you have Entrancing Melody, it means that it's much better at stealing something like a Tarmogoyf for a Death Shadow than a Threads of Disloyalty because it can't be targeted by a Abrupt Decay. In this matchup, it essentially is just a 3 mana take a 1-drop or a 4 mana take a 2-drop, which is a fine deal.
Okay, cool. So on the human side, obviously they already have quite a lot of disruption, but maybe you can't have too much.
Yeah, so looking at the human side of things, there is Gaddock Teague and there is Sin Collector. And Gaddock Teague seems real nice. Now, it's not a human, so it could be harder to cast. You kind of need to vial it. You could have like some Ancient Ziggurat combination of lands, but if you're unlucky enough to have Cavern of Souls or Unclaimed Territory and no vial, it can be hard to cast your Gaddock Teague. However, once this hits the battlefield, the effect is pretty powerful in a matchup like this. It turns off your opponent's cryptic commands. It turns off your opponent's Nahiri the Harbingers. It turns off your opponent's Through the Breaches. And those are some of their most important cards. And their more inexpensive cards are the cards that you really want to be naming with things like Meddling Mage or taking out of their hand with things like Kitesail Freebooter.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, we have some good things with Sin Collector. Mm-hmm. There's an option that like Zarthid Necromancer. I know that card's like usually brought in against sweepers, so it's a way of trying to mitigate that. But there's no Supreme Verdicts in the main deck of Maxime Auger's deck.
Yeah, I don't know if Zan would know that though. So I think it's very possible that Zan. I think it's very likely that Zan is going to bring in the Zarthid Necromancer. And for those who have played against the humans deck, you know how frustrating this card can be, especially when they have a vial on 3. You never feel like your Supreme Verdict is good enough. They usually only have 1 or 2 copies in their board, and the rate at which they draw it's just absurd. I'm being very results oriented, and that's okay.
So one of the one-offs in Zan's sideboard is the Direfleet Daredevil. Actually, this is a new card from Rivals of Ixalan that I've seen a couple one-offs. I'm not sure if it comes in this matchup. Do you think it has enough like applications? It basically works like a Snapcaster Mage but only in your opponent's graveyard. It doesn't flash, which is another thing, but actually combined with a Aether Vial, it can actually be a Snapcaster.
I actually think it's probably pretty good in this matchup. The fact is that Maxime has a lot of one-mana cantrips that Zan can go ahead and take with the Direfleet Daredevil if he needs to. Otherwise, it's just an effective card to play on curve. There are cards that Zan probably does not want in his deck anymore, like a Reflector Mage, for example, and he's going to want to bring in other things. The thing is, so he wants the Reflector Mage because of the combo if he has a Vial. Mm-hmm. He doesn't know about this combo yet.
Right.
If he may have seen Maxime sitting nearby him, he may have some knowledge of that regard, but as far as we know, Zan does not know that Maxime is capable of casting Through the Breach and putting Emrakul into the battlefield.
Fair enough. Maxime gets to go first, plays a Celestial Colonnade. Then Syed, Cavern of Souls, naming Kithkin? No, probably human.
I imagine it's human.
Okay, Island and a Serum Visions. The blue cantrips really, really holding together a lot of the blue-based decks in Modern. There's a few of them have already been banned. With Ponder's not available.
Preordain's gone.
Preordain's gone. So
Gitaxian Probe.
It really shows kind of how much consistency and how much deck manipulation these cards have.
Yeah, and they become more powerful in formats where the cards themselves are more powerful and the combinations are more powerful.
Okay, Thalia, Guardian of Thraben. Really, really excellent against the spell-heavy deck of Maxime Auger.
And Maxime will need to find a removal spell for that in the not-too-distant future.
Okay.
I think that, Zan, not a very aggressive draw here. Only 2 points of power on the table.
Okay, Path to Exile, paying an extra mana because of the taxing effect of Thalia. Zan not getting an extra land because I believe the only basic land in his deck is in play, but now he's playing a Sin Collector. Now, Sin Collector, when it comes into play, target opponent reveals his or her hand, and you choose an instant or sorcery, and then you exile that card. So we have Anger of the Gods, 2 Path to Exile.
Through the Breach.
And
Emrakul the Aeon's Tor.
Right, so does he want to break the combo up with the Through the Breach, which is that's the invocation that you see on the right-hand side. Mm-hmm. Thank you for the picture, Eduardo.
Some nice palm trees there. For those of you who don't know, Through the Breach, a 5-mana instant. It's arcane.
Or do you think that he's going to take one of the 2 paths or the Anger? The Anger is very far off. He doesn't actually have any red mana available to him right now.
Yeah, I think he's got to split up the combo.
Okay, split up the combo so we can have... I think he realizes his clock's a little slow in this case, so he needs to, just be a little bit careful that he doesn't just lose all his permanents with that combo. Maxime drawing a Opt immediately after that Sin Collector, which may help him get to at least one of the red mana that he's missing. He's kept it. And he's played an island, which is not red producing, so he's still kind of pretty far off, though. One good thing for Maxime is he knows that the Path to Exiles are going to give no advantage to Zan at this point because, the first one did not. He still has 2 more paths in play. They are basically strictly better than Swords to Plowshares now. They don't give any sort of advantage to Zan.
Zan has that Zephyr Necromancer that we spoke of earlier in hand, and does not match up particularly well against Maxime having a pair of paths and an Anger of the Gods in hand.
So, Meddling Mage, putting Maxime to the test, he knows that it's very, very likely that he was going to name Path to Exile. So, he decides to just at least get one of them out of his hand, casting out of the Sin Collector.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess also that it's still naming Path to Exile.
Absolutely. I mean, Maxime does not have any red mana in play. So the Anger of the Gods that's in his hand is all but useless until he finds it. He needs at least 2 draw steps, and they need to be somewhat good draw steps to get out of it.
Yeah, actually, he just drew a Flooded Strand, so that's
okay.
That is actually one of the red that will help him to get there. But very soon, he's going to be able to have the second red. That being said, the Meddling Mage probably would have been dispatched by the path had he named Anger of God. So this at least gives him some sort of temporary advantage. And actually, to press that temporary advantage, he plays a Kitesail Freebooter, which is likely to go for the red spell right now, because if we are right and that Meddling Mage has path under its spell.
And at this point, it most assuredly does.
Okay, Aether Vial comes from Zan, and he passes after that. Maxime, using that fetch land, probably going to go for a red-blue or red-white land. Let's see, we go. A red-blue in the form of Steam Vents.
Yeah, Syed did a good job of taking his time with playing out his permanents here. He's had a Mantis Rider in hand for a few turns now, and has declined to cast it, instead choosing to pick apart Maxime's answers. Knew that he didn't want to cast it into the pair of Path to Exiles, so led with the Meddling Mage, then saw the Flooded Strand on the other side of the table, didn't want to lose to a second red source, so played the Kitesail Freebooter. On the next turn, shields will be down, and a Mantis Rider will come riding in right toward Maxime's face.
I mean, it really shows kind of like how effective the disruption of the 5-color humans deck is. I mean, throughout this game, Maxime has drawn 3 Path to Exiles, 1 Anger of the Gods. There is literally, he still Zan still has a bunch of threats in his hand. He has not been locked out of the game. It's very possible now that this Meddling Mage is going to be naming Through the Breach.
That is what I would certainly name here. You're afraid of the 5-mana spell. Could put a giant Eldrazi into play and make you sacrifice every permanent you have.
Oh, yeah, no, he'd be able to keep 1.
Oh, he has the vial. That's
he does
true.
have a vial.
That's true.
Through the Breach. Okay, there's a Gather Teague in Zan's hand. Actually, luckily the Aether Vial is actually on 2, which means that he'll be able to flash that Gaddock Teague into play. Probably going to do it actually during the upkeep of Maxime, just to make sure that card like Cryptic Command doesn't actually get cast. But prior to that, Zan is played a Thalia's Lieutenant.
I mean, he could have even Cryptic Commanded during the main phase. Oh, so here's a Vendilion Click.
So this is actually kind of dangerous.
It's very dangerous.
So what is going to happen is all those Meddling Mages and the Kitesail Freebooter have 3 toughness. So Maxime is going to be able to block one of these creatures. Unbeknownst to him, though, there's a Phantasmal Image in Zan's hand. So I think it's pretty likely that he's going to play it and copy that Thalia's Lieutenant.
Yeah. And that is going to make the Vendilion Click a little more than a speed bump here.
Okay, so those Meddling Mages go up to 4/4, and that Kitesail goes up to 3/4.
7 damage coming in. Maxime's going to fall to 5 here. Die to the next attack now.
This is not looking good for Maxime. But Maxime is at 12-1, so he actually has a loss to give. Finally draws access to the second red. So if he has a way of somehow... Well, actually, this is not even good enough anymore.
Yeah, the creatures have become too big for Anger of the Gods to matter at this point. So I wonder if
Zan might actually flash in Gaddock.
Yeah, I think it's probably correct to tap the vial. At which point Maxime, if he has the cryptic, will probably respond by tapping the team. But if he does not, then...
So if there's a cryptic command in Maxime's hand, it will no longer be cast here, and he'll be able to be attacked for lethal. Gaddock stopping non-creature spells that cost 4 or more, and then basically to put the nail in the coffin, a Mantis Rider comes out from Zan via the cavern, so it's not even counterable, and is going to have many like lethal threats here.
I'm interested to see if Maxime has... I don't think he could possibly survive this situation.
Yeah, no. Zan picks up his 12th win, moving him to 12-2. And Maxime was 12-1 going in this, so he's still 12-2. Still has a shot at the top 8 should he win. And same as Zan, they both have win and ins next round to get into the top 8, or at least the points level required to be in the top 8 at Grand Prix Toronto.
Yeah,
So
Maxime Auger had top 8 at his first Grand Prix here in Canada just last year.
Okay, we have Chris Dockrill versus Bertrand Joseph-Pare.
Ooh, some elf action going on here. Elves is a creature combo deck that aims to empty its hand quickly and kill the opponent very fast, oftentimes using a Zuri, Renegade Leader. In the current versions, I believe.
Okay, so Dwynen's Elite comboed with Nettle Sentinel. What that actually allows him to do is to pay 2 mana, essentially create like another 3 mana with the help of the Heritage Druid.
Yeah, now Bertrand can essentially unload whatever he has. Every single card that he plays is going to untap that Nettle Sentinel, and that will feed into the Heritage Druid's ability.
The die on the left-hand, on the bottom of the screen is actually the amount of green mana that was available. He had some green mana floating. He uses that to cast a Collected Company, untapping the Nettle Sentinel. Kitchen Finks and another Dwynen's Elite. I think there might be a Skull Crack in response to Bertrand's life gain of the Kitchen Finks.
He may also be thinking about, with the Dwynen's Elite trigger on the stack, helixing perhaps the Nettle Sentinel to stop the chain of action from happening here.
No, I think he just let it happen. So Bertrand still kind of like having access to 4 green if he wanted it. Bertrand's still on a healthy 13 life, not really under too much pressure right now. Usually in these kind of matches, if Burn isn't able to like put a fast dent into its opponent's life, it's a little hard for it to kind of like close the game. Especially a deck that like closes the game as fast as Elves does.
Yeah, I think that if Chris Dockrill wants to win this match, he's going to need to draw many copies of Searing Blood and Searing Blaze.
One of the more important... Oh, no, he's just going to be attacking here. One of the more important cards of this deck is the Heritage Druid. So, allowed him to have such an explosive, like previous turn. Now he's actually putting them all into the red zone. All these Elves and Ufes. Okay, Helix. Targeting. We'll find out exactly where the target's on.
I believe he's targeting Bertrand with the Helix.
Right, so he's basically making sure that he doesn't die, but like how much damage is coming through. It's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. which means that Chris actually ends up at 1 life. Bertrand at 10 now.
And I believe Chris may have made a small mistake there by not sacrificing the fetch land and using the other helix in his hand during that attack step, because now Chris is going to need to cast that other helix before he can sacrifice that fetch land. And if both the cards in his hand cost 2 mana here, he's going to get punished pretty badly for that.
Okay. So right now, Chris at 1, Bertrand at 10.
I believe that's correct.
He has Bertrand now at 11 because he actually cast a post-combat Scavenging Ooze, going and then use the ability removing the Eidolon of the Great Revel in the graveyard. Now Chris has a Helix and he has a Riftbolt in his hand. It looks like the mistake didn't cost him simply for the fact that he's just not got enough burn to actually win the game here.
Yeah, it looks like he is a spell short, even if he had sacrificed that fetch land.
And now, another attack, I think for even more this time. The Helix going on to the Nettle Sentinel.
But it looks like that's still lethal by quite a lot.
Oh, yeah. I'm pretty sure that yep. So Chris Dockrill losing to Bertrand Joseph-Pare. Bertrand goes to 13-1. Looks to probably lock his spot into the top 8. Elves.
This is so weird. Like, if somebody told me that Elves was playable like a week ago, I would have been ecstatic. But first of all, because I love playing Elves, I think it's one of the most fun decks to play in the format. But yeah, I am an Elvish champion. I like to think of myself as one. But I thought the deck was quite weak. There was a lot of Shadow. There was a lot of Jeskai. All these decks had a lot of removal that was so strong against the deck. And here's a copy of Elves at 13-1. That's insane.
Well, congratulations to Bertrand. Chris, good luck for the next round because you still have a shot to make the top 8. We are done for the live Magic, so we're going to go to these messages and then we'll be back with more Magic after it. Welcome back to Grand Prix Toronto. I'm Ben Seck. This is Jake Van Lunen. We are in the midst of round 14, the second last round of the Swiss before we cut to the top 8. It's really getting close to the end here.
Yeah, I mean, this is the last round. This is where it all counts. We were looking at the standings. This tournament was big. There's some X2s who might not even make the top 8. That's insane.
Yeah, I think it's 1,700 around that, maybe 16, high 16s. Yeah, no, this is a lot of players, even despite like the snowstorm that is raging outside. But our time walk match is ready, so we're going to head down to there right now. It is Alessandro Pogorzhelsky versus Luke Purcell. Both these players are 12-1. Traverse Shadow versus Jeskai Control. Again, a classic match of this metagame.
Now, Alessandro goes by Morty. He plays at my local store. I have won and lost against him.
How did he choose Morty as a name?
I don't know who gave him that name.
Is it because of Rick and Morty, or is it way before that?
I have no idea. I don't know. It's.
I mean, Morty is a kind of it's a very peculiar nickname, and I'm sure there's a story behind it. He leads off with a Tootsies, nabbing a Supreme Verdict. Traverse Shadow, just really one of the most kind of like, powerful decks kind of in the abstract in the format. Like the best threats, the best removal, the best disruption.
Yeah, so earlier this week on Tuesday, I was at the shop, and my friend Brad at the shop had been playing this deck with Morty, and he said that on Magic Online earlier in the day, they were 13-0 with the deck.
13-0?
And that was this person playing this deck.
Okay.
So just a little FYI about this. I did not know he was doing this well in this tournament.
Well, now he's 25-1 in Traverse Shadow matches. So 13-0, 12-1. That is an insane record. He plays the Tarmogoyf. Now following it up with the Inquisition. Luke is really kind of a bit helpless here. He does have some interaction, but it's all a little bit clunky. He's got a Logic Knot, a Lightning Bolt. Lightning Bolt's not good. Not clearly good enough. He could bolt it, I guess. But the thing is, the way that the timing works, the bolt would actually add
to the toughness.
The toughness. So the bolt would actually not kill the Tarmogoyf, even though officially it would at some point have 3 toughness, but at the end of it would have 4.
Yeah, checks upon resolution.
Okay, takes a Logic Knot. Luke Purcell. Jeskai Control. What version of Jeskai Control is Luke running here? It's like there's a lot of different flavors. I mean, they range from the almost tempo-oriented version all the way to the extreme control version where there's almost no creatures.
So this is a somewhat classical version of the deck. He is attempting to win basically just with Snapcaster Mages, 1 copy of Gideon, Ally of Zendikar, and 1 copy of Secure the Waste. I mean, he also has Colonnades, but...
Right, so this is much more on the control side of it. I mean, I can see a Sphinx's Revelation in his deck. So there's not a lot of kind of, attempt at trying to steal wins with cards like Geist of Sintraft or Spell Queller.
Yeah, so an interesting thing we just saw there, Luke targeted Alessandro's Tarmogoyf with Electrolyze. And you may say, well, it didn't kill the Tarmogoyf and he was getting the turn back. Why would he do that? And it's so... Morty cannot deploy his Death Shadows.
That is like kind of like, understanding what your opponent wants, is trying to do, making sure that he's not getting to the point where, he's creating his own enemy by making Morty's life total low. Okay, so now he's going to actually deal with the Tarmogoyf by trying to bolt and then bolt it again, but Alessandro has a Stubborn Denial at the ready.
And Tarmogoyf is incredible against these blue-red decks. Just in general, as somebody who played a lot of the blue-red decks in like last month or so, I spent about 3 weeks just playing those decks in Modern as the only Magic I was playing. And whenever somebody played a Tarmogoyf against me, I always felt absolutely miserable.
Okay, so Luke attempts to Cryptic Command the Tarmogoyf. I think he's trying to bounce it, but what he does actually is he searches for a blue mana from his deck and has a second Stubborn Denial for that Cryptic Command. Just really, really kind of making life really tough for Luke. It's also possible, I don't know exactly what the current power of the Tarmogoyf is. Let's see, 1 sorcery, 1 instant, 1 land. Do we have a creature? No. No artifact or enchantment. Because the reason I ask is because Morty actually has a Team of Battle Rage in his hand. So if it was 4, it would be lethal should Luke not choose to
Yeah, and it
block.
looks like it may be lethal here.
Is it 3/4 or 4/5?
Instant sorcery.
Oh, it will be lethal now.
Yeah, now most assuredly.
And there he goes. Double striking the Lurgoyf, making it 8 damage and being lethal. Okay. Let's go to game 2. Luke on the play. Glacial Fortress comes into play tapped. Does not have a friend to make it untapped.
And this is one of the more difficult decks to play in Modern, the Traverse Shadow deck here. It's not quite as hard, I don't think, as Grixis Shadow. It might just be a little different, though. Grixis Shadow, I think the difficult decisions are more front-loaded. Mm-hmm. Like, your first through third turn are impossible, and then it gets really easy. Whereas this deck is just reasonably difficult the whole way through.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the reason is Traverse the Ulvenwald specifically gives it a lot of kind of bullet-style tutoring available to it, and so some of those late-game choices are a little bit tougher because you've got the entire deck to choose from once you have that ready. Grimflayer on turn 2 by Morty. He's kind of like allowing Luke the opportunity to counter it. He does not. Luke does have a Path to Exile. The Traverse Shadow deck, traditionally does not have a lot of basic lands. In fact, he only has 1 in this case.
Yeah, only 1 in full 75.
And there he goes. And he's probably going to get it. But funnily enough, there's a swamp in Morty's hand. So there's no advantage. And Luke now knows, that there's a little piece of information that he gets. Like, nearly every deck runs 1 basic in their deck just to kind of, punish the first version of Path to Exile or Field of Ruin. So Luke probably guesses, and there it is. He has 1 swamp in his hand. Now the swamp is out. So Luke didn't actually play his Search for Azcanta in his hand because he wanted to keep up Logic Knot.
Yeah, by not casting that, he was leaving open both Logic Knot and Path to Exile at the same time, and he felt like that was more valuable than searching, if you will, for more lands.
So one of the problems with that is that Luke actually missed his 4th land drop, so it feels like trying to be reactive while you're not able to develop your game might be a little troublesome.
Well, the thing is he has the tools he needs to be reactive in this type of situation, because it's clear that Alessandro does not have any offensive threats right now, right? So he has a pair of Logic Knots and a Path to Exile, and if Alessandro doesn't have a threat, then those are likely good enough for him to just draw his way out of only having 3 lands. And it's not like Alessandro is going to be hitting land drops and presenting more powerful things. Alessandro's whole deck costs 3 or less.
Sure. Okay. Alessandro still does not have any threats forthcoming. They're both stuck at 4 land. Alessandro puts his 5th land into play. Now it feels like the game is turning into the mid-game where the Jeskai deck really is much more advantaged. Spells are more powerful, just a lot more ways of pulling ahead.
Absolutely. I think the Jeskai deck once it gets to those big numbers, if you look at Luke Purcell's hand, he has Elspeth Sun's Champion in his hand right now. It's maybe the most powerful 6-mana spell available in the format. Consecrated Sphinx might have something to say about that. So is Primeval Titan, but I'm looking at Elspeth Sun's Champion right now, and it looks pretty good to me.
Primeval Titan, I don't know, it seems to be my go-to, but I can appreciate that.
Oh, yeah, Primeval Titan is definitely the best 6,
How about
right?
Part the Water Veil? That's a great card.
That is a great card. It's a big one.
Luke doesn't draw a 6th land and has to discard to hand size, so he puts a Logic Knot into the graveyard. I think he realizes that it's not as powerful in this situation when, 1, Alessandro knows, and 2, he already has another Logic Knot, so it's actually hard to delve both of them.
Yeah, especially when Alessandro also has hit a lot of lands here. Remember, Alessandro's deck does not play that many land. You look at the deck list, and it's an 18-lander, and he's currently got more than a third of all of the land that's in his library on the battlefield.
So Luke really wants to try and put this game away and continue on to game 3. So he's cast a Secure the Waste for 3, which is a small one, but he clearly has leaving up 1 blue for some sort of interaction. I think there's a Spell Snare in his hand. So Alessandro has responded with a Cold Guns command, getting rid of 1 of the tokens. We don't actually have the tokens in play, but it's waiting for the table judge to help us here.
I saw them appear for a moment.
I don't know if they're I think they were soldiers or warriors.
I believe so. Maybe warriors?
They're meant to be the Secure the Waste
cons. So
they're meant to be warriors, but I just wanted to know if those tokens were actually the right type. Not that it matters that much. We can use our imaginations. Okay, so we're waiting for some tokens, I presume.
Yeah. So lots of land here in play for Morty this game. Luke, not quite as much land as he would have liked. The classic flood versus it choke kind of situation.
Now our warriors have appeared.
Here they are.
And Alessandro does not have any blockers.
Ooh, a pair of Ruined Halos there in hand for Luke Purcell. If you're able to stick a Ruined Halo naming Tarmogoyf and a Ruined Halo naming Death Shadow, it significantly strangles the offense that a deck like Traverse Shadow is able to output.
Yeah, only really being able to get rid of those with 2 Abrupt Decays. And then if it doesn't have that, it really has to rely on one Grimslayer, maybe a Street Wraith or something else like that.
If I had a dog for every time somebody attacked me with a Street Wraith that they cast for 5 mana in Modern...
Would you have a pack of dogs?
I would have 40 dogs.
I have no idea why you chose dog as the...
Yeah, I could have chose donut. I could just...
I could do with the donut right now. Snapcaster is getting Logic Knotted from Luke Purcell. I think Alessandro was going to attempt to cast Cold Guns command from the graveyard. Now he's able to cast... Alessandro's going to cast a Traverse, which I believe he does have Delirium. And if he does, he's going to be able to search for any creature or any land.
Yes. I believe post-board here, his options are Grimflayer, Street Wraith, Tarmogoyf, Death Shadow, and, he already used his Snapcaster. He only has 1.
Okay, so it's a Shadow. He also casts another Traverse just to shortcut it a little bit. Luke also lets that one go. But he's kind of ready for these Death Shadows. He has Rune Halos, so if Alessandro kind of pushes on the same creature, that Rune Halo is going to like be really good. Also, if you just cast both of them, he has a detention sphere.
Yeah, Alessandro may be trying to set up a situation where he's able to cast both Death Shadows this turn, play them into a detention sphere, and then set up so that he can Abrupt Decay that detention sphere on Luke Purcell's end step, hopefully without Luke Purcell casting the Ruined Halo, and that might be the, like, hopefully for him anyway, the window of opportunity to get into the game.
Okay, so now it's kind of an interesting decision. Like, Luke knows that there is a Death Shadow in Alessandro's hand. He may try and sculpt the situation such that he's able to nab both of them. But if he waits too long, he won't be able to actually press the damage with his warriors. Death Shadow is not a coward, so it can block a warrior.
Yes. Nice little reference to, I believe, Boldwere Intimidator.
That's right. Mishra's a bauble, targeting himself, getting a little peek at what's going to happen next.
Also giving him information as to whether or not he should be sacrificing the Verdant Catacombs that he has in play right now.
Okay, so Luke has kind of gone in defensive mode, decides to chump with the warrior. The warrior is also not cowards. Okay, the third traverse. Is he going to go for the trifecta of Death Shadows? Nope. Decides to diversify his threats. Goes for a Tarmogoyf. Now, Luke Purcell has a Cryptic Command at the ready, so I can see a world where he casts the Cryptic Command. Maybe countering draw? Nope. He's just going to let that happen. And wow, rewarded.
Yes.
He draws a sideboarded Supreme Verdict, getting rid of 3 huge threats on Morty's side. Just totally punished for, like, overextending in play. I wonder if this might be a slight miscalculation on Alessandro's side.
Yeah, overplayed into it a bit, maybe.
Yeah, now, and really, you know, if Luke draws a land, he was going to be able to play that Elspeth Suns champion, but luckily on Alessandro's side, for Alessandro's sake, he actually has a Thoughtseize, which is probably going to have to nab that Suns champion, but it's just too dangerous to be in the hand of Luke, and probably in play next turn if he just draws a single land. Oh, nope. Decides to get rid of a Ruined Halo, which is interesting. What it indicates is, I think he knows that there are Stubborn Denials still left in Alessandro's hand, just because he left it there. He's like, why did you let me have it?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think he would have allowed one to hold on to an Elspeth Suns champion had.
Okay, so there's a Collective Brutality going for the duress-like mode of but so Alessandro actually has 2 Stubborn Denials able to counter Elspeth. Now, while that was actually, you know, relatively good exchange for Alessandro getting rid of the best threat, I mean, Luke still has a Colonnade. This is he's by far from out of gas here.
Luke Purcell's got plenty to do. He's got that Celestial Colonnade. And I assume he wins that game.
We assume that he won the game there. Now we're going to go to game 3. Alessandro, the play now. Plays his Mishra's Bauble. Has a little peek.
And the reason you do that right away is so you can decide whether or not you want to sacrifice your fetch land. If you have a Street Wraith, you can order them up properly.
Okay, so now a Serum Visions from Luke. After taking 3 from his Steam Vents and Hallowed Fountain.
Looks like Luke has Path to Exile again. We've talked before about how good that card is in this particular matchup. Alessandro only playing a single basic land in his deck.
Okay, sacrificing the Bloodstained Mire. It might be the only land he has in his hand. It's I can't tell, but it looked like he either has one or no lands in his hand. So this is why this is taking a little bit longer than you would expect. He just needs to know what is the correct land I need, such that I can sequence my threats best. Oh, no, he does. He does have a breeding pool.
That was a really important breeding pool.
Follows it up with an Inquisition of Kozilek. Let's see what Luke is cooking with. Gideon, Ally of Zendikar, Celestial Purge, Path to Exile, Search for Azcanta, and another Path to Exile. So what's going to be happening here?
I imagine one of the paths is going to get taken here. If I had to guess, the rest of the cards are all more mana hungry, and it's going to be easy for Luke Purcell to double spell on multiple turns with those Path Exiles, and Alessandro wants to be the one who's double spelling. That's how he wins.
Yeah. So it looks like, yep, it does look like that Alessandro has Delirium. Alessandro did not take the Search for Azcanta. Presumably he has a way of dealing with it, because that's one of the most powerful cards Luke can be deploying there, just because one, it's just Azcanta, the Sunken Ruin, is so powerful, and two, it ramps him a land too.
Yeah, I think Alessandro's okay with that happening on this turn, just because it gives him an opportunity to put some threats on the battlefield and force Luke to tap some mana on his own turn. He knows about the Purge and the additional path, so if he's going to play out the Death Shadow here and Tarmogoyf, then, he's kind of accepting the fact that Luke's just going to play a land, Purge, path. I mean, Luke needs another white source, but...
Okay, so Luke is looking at the top of his deck, finds a Scalding Tarn, which will give him another white source. It's either going to be a white-red or white-blue. White-red comes into play. Probably going to clear out Alessandro's board. His two threats are pretty big, so this time he actually has access to a swamp, so he's going to grab a swamp, be able to get to 4 land, hopefully be able to play 2 spells, at least for Alessandro's part, the next turn.
And there we see how important it is to be casting 2 spells a turn when you're playing against the Traverse Shadow deck.
Yep.
That's kind of how they beat you.
Okay, we're speeding up the play a little bit, because we're almost hitting the final round, so we want to show you the end of this match. So Alessandro plays out 2 Death Shadows. Luke responds with a Snapcaster Mage. Okay. Misses with an Inquisition, plays another Tarmogoyf. Right now, the only card that Luke is likely to be able to play is a Gideon, but it's pretty weak at this point, because Alessandro can just attack with both his creatures.
And I think that's got to be the line here.
Okay. Thoughtseize, perfect actually time, because it actually grows the Death Shadow to a point where it cannot be double blocked, and it was able to take a Cryptic Command from Luke's hand. Okay, Luke having to chump with both creatures here. Now playing off the top, really. I mean, I guess there's an argument maybe that he could attack with Gideon.
Yeah, I mean, if he attacks with Gideon, he puts Alessandro down to 3. I guess like a bolt could win the game for him in that situation. But even here, it doesn't seem too bad.
Okay,
He has the Planeswalker in play.
So Alessandro's trying to decide. So he basically double attacks Gideon here. Oh, wow. Okay, so Luke rips a Supreme Verdict.
They're both drawing off the top, though. This is an exciting one.
And Alessandro's kind of like used a lot of his threats. I believe he's played 3 Death Shadows already, so he doesn't actually have that many threats left in his deck. And now Luke is kind of like starting to pull it back a bit, especially because he's got a Cryptic Command and a Logic Knot in hand. So at least 2 threats are going to be able to be covered by Luke. Now I think Alessandro, despite being pretty far ahead at one point, is now kind of like falling behind.
Yeah, when he had a look with that very first Inquisition of Kozilek, it looked like he had a pretty good chance of winning this game, but a timely Supreme Verdict was...
Secure the race for 4 on Luke's side. Or is it 4 or 5? No. He went for 4. Interestingly, because Alessandro's at 5, gives him an extra turn, but then actually finishes the job off with an Electrolyze. So Luke Purcell moving to 13-1 and probably into top 8 contention. And Alessandro's still got a chance. But we are ending our Time Walk match. We're going to be back with the final round of Swiss after these messages.